Hello humanoids, Halfling Hannah here from halflinghobbies.com, and today I'm here to tell you that death is dumb in Dungeons & Dragons. Here's why. And you heard me right. I don't use death in my Dungeons & Dragons games.
What?
Now, before you call me a druid pacifist and change the channel to something else, hear me out. It's not that I don't like death. It's not that I don't think death is sometimes necessary and useful and can move the story along. It's just that sometimes there are options far worse than death.
Oh, thank you from a fate worse than death, counselor!
Now, here are some of the reasons why I don't use death in D&D. First of all, it kills stories, quite literally. Sometimes your players have awesome backstories that develop into your plot and that add to the overall feel of the world, and they're important and useful, and your characters, your players really want to tell them, and you really want to tell them. And to just kill those off means to just get rid of them. And that's just too painful. I mean, as DMs, we're storytellers. We love a good story. And to simply get rid of one like that, well, it's not in our DNA. So I don't use death because I don't like to kill stories like that. Second reason I don't use death is that I feel like it limits my players' creativity. My players are encouraged, nay, forced to use creative means in both combat and in outside of combat encounters. I want them to be creative. I want them to be off the wall. I want them to come up with unique solutions to things. And if my players are constantly afraid of dying and losing that character forever, then it limits their creativity. They're going to play it safe. They're going to not take chances. They're not going to do the things that I'm encouraging them to do.
It's a leap of faith.
By the way, I encourage them to do that by using inspiration. And if you don't use inspiration, you definitely need to watch my video at the end of this one about why you should be using inspiration if you're not. I guarantee you're going to want to watch that if you're not. And the third reason why I do not use death in D&D is because I feel like it cheapens characters. To simply get rid of a character means that they weren't necessarily all that important anyway. And I've heard DMs say over and over, D&D is a dangerous world. Adventurers die in these dungeons. That's what makes them so epic. Adventurers die all the time. Yes. But your party is trying to be more than adventurers. They're trying to be heroes. And how can they ever get to that point if every time they die and they have to create an entirely new character that's going through this journey too, and they just never end up being the heroes that they want to be if you're constantly killing off characters. Instead, to make them heroes, you have to give them something to overcome. They have to face a challenge that seems like it's going to overrun them, it's going to overtake them, and then they overcome it. You do this by using some consequences that are not death. Instead of death, here is what I use in my campaigns, and I encourage you to try out as well. If a player rolls 3 failed death saves and they would normally die, and there's no spellcaster around to resurrect them or anything like that, then instead of actually dying, I have my players fall unconscious until the end of initiative order. They have to wait until combat is done. Then the rest of the party can revive them, but then they have to take them to a town, a city, village, something like that, and recover for 1 week. They cannot go out adventuring for 1 week. And you might be thinking, that's not that much of a consequence. I mean, 1 week of downtime and then they can just go right back at it? That doesn't seem like that big of a consequence. Well, that's not the only consequence. So that's what happens when a player would normally die. In addition to that, I do one of the following. First option, an injury. So in circumstances happens all the time in real life. Something really dangerous happens and people don't die. Instead, they lose a limb, they lose an eye, they have some kind of permanent injury because of what happened. You can do the same thing with your characters. Have them lose an eye, have them lose a leg, and then they have a debuff to their stats related to that. So example, if they lose an eye, then they have disadvantage on all perception checks that use vision. If they lose a leg, they would have disadvantage on dexterity saving throws. So this becomes definitely a consequence that players will want to avoid. Nobody wants to have a negative to their stats. Nobody wants a debuff like that. But it is something that they can overcome. It is not a punishment to that player for dying, because I give them an opportunity to, in a way, become whole again or overcome that obstacle. So, if they lose an eye, then they might hear tell of a hag that lives in the mountains far above that will give them a replacement for their eye, a magical eye, maybe even with some advantages of seeing into the future, but also has some disadvantages, such as perhaps a little bit of insanity from the knowledge that they gain from that eye. And they also have to give something up in order to receive it from the hag. If they are missing a leg, they can find a tinkerer in the city who will make them a mechanical leg that has some advantages and some disadvantages. Perhaps it helps them run faster, but they have to roll when they receive damage to see if their leg seizes up, meaning that they can't move during combat for an entire round. It provides advantages, disadvantages, a cool quest for them to go on to try and overcome whatever obstacle it is that I have given them, as well as an awesome story at the end of the campaign. You look back at this character who now has a magical eye, has a mechanical leg, and has amazing stories to tell with it. That is far better than simply killing off that character. It has character development. It has cool storylines. It makes them look bad. Can I say ass? Makes them look badass. I don't know if I can say that. Bleep it out if I can't say ass, okay? So it just adds so much to the character as opposed to just killing them and ending the story right then and there. Another thing that you can do instead of character death is you can take their items. There is nothing players hate more than when you take away their toys. So if they've just bought a new magical sword that's awesome, or they have a bag of holding that they hold all of this crap in, if you steal or break those items as a consequence for them falling unconscious, that, trust me, is a huge consequence. And most players will prefer to die than to have that happen to them, because at least they get to keep their stuff if they die, right? Their party takes it. So if you have a horde of goblins that overruns your characters and you have a total party wipe, they all fall unconscious. They wake up, or someone comes in and saves them. You got an old druid that comes in, wakes them up, helps them recover, and they wake up butt naked. They've got nothing. No armor, no clothes, no gold, nothing. And they have to start over from scratch. Their characters are still the same. They just don't have any of the stuff that they've gathered over all of this time. It is both hilarious to see what they do when they wake up like that, and it helps develop those characters, keep the story going. Much better than death. Lastly, for your more veteran players who are really good role players, once they've died maybe a couple of times, I like to give them a trait of madness. So it's not necessarily that they go completely insane, it's that maybe they start developing some traits, like being afraid of certain situations, like being underground. Suddenly they're claustrophobic and they cannot be in any space smaller than a 10 by 10 room. Anything smaller than that, they have claustrophobia and they have to roll on like a panic list to see what they do. These traits, again, add to the character, create some cool roleplay opportunities, and keep the story going instead of just killing off that character. They can really be really fun, but they are still a consequence to the fact that they died during combat. Now, there are times when death is simply inevitable. There's no way to avoid it. Either the characters sacrifice themselves for someone else, showing extreme character development, and you wouldn't dare cheapen that moment by saying, oh, they're not actually dead, they come back to life. Like, you wouldn't do that. That would be ridiculous. Or maybe like a dragon eats them and there's no body left, and it would be, again, ridiculous to say, oh, you find him unconscious in the dragon poop in the lair. You wouldn't do that. So there are times when character death is unavoidable. If that happens to you, there are some do's and some don'ts for character death. Let's start out with the do's. Here's what you should do if you have a player that dies. First of all, if at all possible, let the player have some last words before they die. This can be on the battlefield when they're being held in the arms of one of their comrades and they get to choke out a few last words. Or if you deem it fit, it's after all of the fighting stops and they find them laying there in their final moments and they get to have one last talk with them before they die. Anything like that adds some closure, some could be funny moment, could be a heart-rending moment. All of those things are really good for role play and is definitely a do. If you can't do that one, if the situation simply does not allow it, they fell off a bridge and you don't want them shouting out their last words as they fall into oblivion, you can always have the party find a letter or a journal entry that was written by that dead character to the party. As long as it fits with the character, this is a great option. Give them until the next session to write a letter to the party where they can air things out, get things off their chest, or if they had a certain thing that they were trying to accomplish as a character that they don't want to end, they can actually pass that on to the party and ask them to fulfill it for them, to find something for them, or, to take care of whoever it was that they left back at home, which was the reason they went adventuring. And that can add a really sweet moment, some closure, some final moments, and something for the party to hang on and remember that character. Another do is, if it fits with your party and your players want to do that, let them have a funeral during the next session. It can be as long or short as you want it to be, but let them have some moments just to remember that character, to mourn the loss of that character. And a funeral can be as formal as an actual memorial service, or it can be some drinks at a local tavern where your characters just drink and tell your favorite stories about the PC that is no longer with them. This is a great way to laugh together, to remember the good times, and to kind of end that final chapter in that character's life and move on, and might be a great place to introduce the new player character if that fits. Another thing that you should definitely do is make sure that you keep the memory alive. You can do this in a variety of ways. If the player died defending a village and they became the savior or the hero of that village, maybe they build a statue in their honor that stays there. And even in future campaigns, when you go through that town, you see that statue there. Or if you're in a big city and it's one of the major boss battles and your wizard is the one that dies, they can build a library in their honor, name it in their memory. However you want to do it, just make sure that you keep the memory of that character alive so that their death was not just a waste, it meant something and the world remembers them for it. Now for the list of don'ts. Here's what you should not do if you have a player that dies during your campaign. First of all, you should not punish that player for dying, even if they died in the most stupid way possible. And trust me, they can figure out some stupid ways to die. Even if it was their fault and it was stupid, don't punish them for their death. Death is punishment enough. Make the transition as easy as possible. I've seen DMs bragging about how they punish their players for dying, and I guess if that's your house rule, go for it. But do not make your players start at 2 levels below the rest of the party or anything weird like that. Just bring in a new player character and make that transition easy and fun. Next, do not brush over the death. So even if you're not a super serious campaign and players die all the time and you roll new characters and it's part of it, don't brush over the death because it makes it feel like the character didn't matter at all. You want to take a moment, you want to stop things, you want to recognize that this character has died and that the rest of the party would probably mourn for them. And you want to take the time to do that. Don't just brush it under the rug, move on, pretend like nothing happened. This can be especially tempting for those DMs who don't particularly like conflict with their players, and you can feel like that'll bring up conflict, so you want to avoid it. Don't avoid it, just let it happen. Take the time to really flesh out that death, okay? Next, do not bring in a new PC immediately. I at least wait until the next session to bring in a new player character, otherwise it just makes it feel weird and awkward, and like, again, that character didn't matter, we're moving on, we're never going to talk about him again. Give it at least until the next session to give the player time to come up with a new character, to get excited about that character, to figure out a way to work them into the party, and then bring that new player character in the next session or two, wherever it fits in the story. Don't have them go into the next room, roll up a new character real quick, and then throw them in. It's okay to just let that person just sit in and enjoy the session without actually participating in it. I promise, it's not that big of a deal. They'll be fine. Last of all, do not participate in the blame game. Especially if the player was really attached to their character and really loved their character, they will probably start blaming you for their character death. You made an encounter that wasn't balanced. You fudged a roll. There's no way you got 2 nat 20s. You did something to make this happen. And as the DM who knows your stuff, it can be really tempting to be like, no, it was your fault. It was an ancient dragon. You shouldn't have run up to try to stab it with the dagger. Don't do that. Recognize that your player is most likely just going through the stages of mourning, and anger is one of those. They're blaming you for everything. Don't play the blame game. Don't be a part of it. Simply encourage them that their next character is also going to be fun, and you're going to find a way to weave it into the structure of the game, and it's going to be a positive experience overall. Those are the do's and don'ts. Here is one more tip for you. Halflings are good luck, and subscribing to a Halfling channel or liking a Halfling video is double luck for your campaign. So make sure that you like this video, that you subscribe to the channel, and that you hit that notification bell so that you will know anytime I release new material on YouTube. Until we meet again, my friends, may your games have advantage. Halfling Hannah here, signing out.